I've embraced a new magical girl concept for their most recent comeback, Accendio, and in doing so, they went out of their way to pay homage to one of the greatest anime of all time.
愛と正義のセーラース美少女戦士セーラームーン
Also known simply as Sailor Moon in the West. While IVE's particular twist on the magic girl concept and storyline are uniquely their own, there are numerous subtle references to Naoko Takeuchi's iconic tale woven into the Accendio music video. Let's explore some of the inspiration I've pulled from one of the most influential magical girl stories of all time. Chapter 1. What is Sailor Moon? To the uninitiated, Sailor Moon is a story centered upon the warm-hearted but clumsy eponymous heroine and her entourage of Sailor Senshi, or Sailor Scouts in the English version, who team up with her to fight bad guys and save the universe every week. To describe it as noteworthy would be quite an understatement. I feel safe saying it qualifies up there with Dragon Ball and Naruto as one of the top 5 most iconic anime of all time, and it's without question a pioneer of the magical girl subgenre. Sailor Moon debuted initially as a manga written by Naoko Takeuchi in 1991 and quickly made its way to the small screen, where its initial run lasted 5 seasons or a total of 200 episodes, plus a few spin-off movies. The OG anime series first dropped in 1992 while the manga was still being written, resulting in a lot of filler episodes being added to give Naoko Takeuchi time to catch up with the anime writers to avoid the plot veering off in the wrong direction. Starting in 2014, the anime was rebooted as Sailor Moon Crystal, which returned to the plotline and art style of the original manga and removed most of the filler present in the original anime. The story was also later ported to numerous other media, including several video games and live-action musicals, but only the anime and manga are relevant formats for this particular analysis. If you're planning to start watching Sailor Moon for the first time, I'd honestly recommend Crystal over the original anime on account of its conciseness and ability to make me actually care about my 2 least favorite characters, Chibiusa and Mamoru. You would think with how fond of Pink I am that Chibiusa would be my favorite, but unfortunately I find her to be completely insufferable in the original anime. It's a small miracle that Crystal made her not only tolerable, but a genuinely sympathetic character. I do think she makes a brief appearance in the Accendio video, but we'll get to that in a bit. Chapter 2. The Jacket. When I made my Baddie video, I openly pondered whether I was insane and pulling the concept out of thin air. However, I am convinced beyond all shadow of a doubt that I am onto something for real this time. I thought that the Accendio video seemed Sailor Moon coded on first watch, but this shot of Gaul frantically biking settled the matter for me in my mind and convinced me that I had to make this video exploring it. The reference didn't jump out at me on the first, second, or third watch, but when I finally saw it, I literally shrieked with delight. Do you see it? She has a silhouette of Sailor Moon printed on her jacket. Trust me, I'd recognize that logo anywhere. I have a tattoo inspired by it on my right bicep. Including that one subtle but undeniable callback to Sailor Moon makes it clear that Naoko Takeuchi's story served as reference material during the Accendio concept development. I think it was smart to incorporate that formal acknowledgement of Sailor Moon's influence on the concept, as it makes it clear that the parallels are intentional and not lifted without awareness. There's a huge difference between pulling inspiration and plagiarizing. This jacket makes it clear that they're doing the former and not the latter. Chapter 3. Who is whom? Curiously enough, though Gaul is the one wearing the Sailor Moon logo on her garment, and despite seeming very much like the main character of the tale, I do not think that she is actually IVE's analog for Sailor Moon. I think she's Sailor Pluto. Season 1 of Sailor Moon introduced Sailor Moon and the 4 companions known as the Inner Senshi, Ami, Minako, Rei, and Makoto. I think that these characters are the 5 members in the pool. Sailor Pluto was not introduced until Season 2, which is also known as Sailor Moon R. Sailor Pluto has one of the most powerful proprietary weapons in the series, the Garnet Rod, which you might note looks suspiciously like the top of the broken staff that Gaul steals. Also significant is that the Garnet Rod gives Sailor Pluto the unique capacity to control and reverse the flow of time, which ties in perfectly with the backwards time skip that happens when Gaul slams the stolen component on the table. Particularly in this scene, I think the other 5 members of IVE are styled in ways that subtly reference the Inner Senshi's personal aesthetics. But we'll get to that a little later in the episode. The actual Sailor Senshi are elemental guardians, which the IVE members do not appear to be, so the matter of who corresponds to which Senshi is purely conjecture and not super relevant to the story, but I do think there are parallels here. I think my favorite bit is that Sailor Mars's human name is Ray, but Ives Ray is actually their analog for Sailor Moon, not Sailor Mars. Maybe they thought that would have been too on the nose. Or maybe Yujin can't pull off pigtails as well, who knows. Either way, Ray is styled in pigtails throughout the video, and there are explicit nods to Usagi and Ray's styling elsewhere in the video, which we'll cover later in the episode. Ray is also the one shown counting down when the 5 members are underwater in the pool, and she's the one who receives the mission to defend the magic wand, implying that she's functioning as the leader this time around. Notably, she doesn't have Sailor Moon's signature Odango dumpling buns, which are so iconic Ive would have rightfully been accused of copyright infringement if they had incorporated them. Rather, I've opted to pull aesthetic inspiration from many of Sailor Moon's costumes and iconography without attempting to overtly cosplay any of the characters, which is much more interesting in my opinion. Chapter 4. Super S. The first Sailor Moon reference in the Accendio video happens long before that scene with the garnet rod, though. It's the floaty Gaul is wearing as she stands outside of the pool. You see, there's a character named Pegasus who had both Pegasus wings and a unicorn horn like the floaty, who was one of the primary protagonists of Season 4, known better as Sailor Moon Supers or Super S, depending on whom you ask. I think that this particular season served as a primary source of inspiration for Accendio, as there are a number of other elements that call back to that season specifically. Delightfully, the Pegasus floaty also serves the purpose of subtly tying the Heya and Accendio videos together. You see, Pegasus is actually the alter ego of a character named Helios, named for the god of the sun in Greek mythology. The Heya video featured Ive channeling a myth of sun-eating tigers. Watch Chochimi's video on the topic if you haven't already. So incorporating a reference to a character named after a sun god right at the beginning of the subsequent music video is very clever. You also hear the whinny of a horse when the other 5 Ive girls enter the house in search of Gaul, which reinforces the importance of that particular floaty choice. The primary antagonist of Super S is an evil queen named Nehelenia, who pulls a lot of her inspiration from Snow White's mother in terms of her rabid, jealous obsession with her own personal beauty and appearance in a haunted mirror. I think she served as the inspiration behind the evil Ive members' costumes, which borrow some of her silhouettes and her off-white and black color scheme, although I really wish they'd have gone full send on someone wearing a floor-length curly wig in her honor. The fact that you see them using an ornate mirror to watch the other members from afar also drives home this parallel. Chapter 5. Aesthetic Nods. The visual references to Sailor Moon's costuming do not stop there, though. They're littered throughout the music video. I mentioned earlier that I think that there are nods to the inner senshi in each of the costumes in this scene. I think that Iso is Ami, or Sailor Mercury, due to the glasses. I think that Wonyoung is Makoto, or Sailor Jupiter, due to the high ponytail and the curly hair. I think that Liz is Minako, or Sailor Venus, due to her being blonde. I think that Yujin is Mars, whose name also happens to be Ray, because of the long, straight black hair and full bangs. And I think that Ives Ray is Usagi, or Sailor Moon, due to the pigtails. These elegant white and blue outfits very much seem to pull their inspiration from the fashion of the Moon Kingdom, which favors lots of white and lots of gaudy gold jewelry. In particular, it's really giving me Neo Queen Serenity. They all have hearts and gaudy gold settings accessorizing their garments, and there's a scene where a heart is embellished in armor, both of which remind me of the ornate lockets Sailor Moon uses to transform. Part of why I'm pretty convinced that Ray is actually Sailor Moon is the large bow and off-shoulder pieces that are part of her dress in this scene. When coupled with the big bow in the back, it's really giving Super Sailor Moon, which is the uniform that she wore in Season 4 with Nehelenia and Pegasus. There's also a brief shot right before Ray receives the mission to protect the magic wand where she's wearing a big gaudy gold ring that appears to be shaped suspiciously like the Kaleido Moonscope, which is the weapon that Super Sailor Moon used in that same season. We also see Wonyoung produce a wand out of thin air that looks suspiciously like the weapon that Super Sailor Moon used in the previous season, the Spiral Heart Moonrod. The outfits that they transform into for their dance break at the end also seem to have some nods to Sailor Moon's costuming as well. The Ive members are all wearing wings in their hair with 3 prongs, which very much are reminiscent of the wings present in most iterations of Sailor Moon's uniform. These cross-strap Mary Janes remind remind me of the ones Usagi wears to school throughout the series. And the tops that they're wearing are also very reminiscent of the crop top poofy sleeve shirts that are affiliated with her middle school uniform that she wears in seasons 1 through 4. I could also see where you could get Princess Serenity from them too, though. The gaudy belt buckles remind me of the locket present at the belly of Sailor Moon's uniform. But is it just me, or does it look like it's a belt buckle of the Heya move? It also kind of reminds me of a Clawdaw ring, which is a symbol of love and friendship that ties in thematically. Chapter 6. But did they succeed? The music video leaves it a little ambiguous whether I've actually succeeded in their mission to protect their magic wand. Gowl appears to deposit it into a portal, but then when the girls go back to see if it's still in the refrigerator, it appears to be gone and is now on the beach in the hands of a little girl with some pointy-looking buns that remind me suspiciously of a pink bitch that I kinda hate most of the time. Could this be Chibiusa? There's no way to know, but I have my suspicions and it might be. What makes me think that I've failed in their mission, though, is the fact that their wings just seem to slowly disappear. I didn't even catch it on my first watch, so don't feel bad if you didn't either. Chapter 7. Lyrical Analysis. I don't want to waste too much time reading into this, but I am going to slap on my Nyan Chantix hat for 2 seconds and go through these lyrics really quickly because I do think that there are some actual references to Sailor Moon nested inside of them. Briefly, you talk too much. Usagi is like the poster child for undiagnosed ADHD, so that checks out. First impressions, the stronger the better. Usagi immediately clicks with all of her Sailor Senshi when she first meets them. Oh, affectionate but cold as ice. I told you I hated Mamoru, right? Dude sucks. Team Seiya. Shit, I'll take Team Haruka. Literally anybody but Mamoru. In the pre-chorus, they say, "Ooh, when your calm heart sees me, yeah, I like that, it might stop. Now I'm changing, can't you see?" Which seems to be an obvious reference to the transform sequences that permeate Sailor Moon, especially since one of them coincides with that line in the music video. Verse 2 is like a play-by-play of those transform sequences. Pupils dyed with colors never seen before. That emotion is pure, that gaze is love. Pushing you into the smoke. 6 drops of magic syrup. A possible reference to how Usagi drinks from the Holy Grail during Moon Crisis makeup. And we pop into the mirror. I told you those mirrors were coming back. Pearls all over my body. Swirl 2 fingers. This might be a reference to how Sailor Moon likes to wildly gesture at people with the metal sign. Show you a sweet curse. A sweet curse such as...
月に変わってアシャキャン
When they say cast a spell, Accendio, it seems to be a reference to the way that Sailor Moon and her companions cast spells to conquer their enemies. Accendio is a form of the word ascendium, which is a kindling, or to light something on fire. But it can also be interpreted as to create light, to be brilliant, to make something brilliant, to illuminate the darkness. I think anybody who loved this show can tell you that that's always what Sailor Moon did best. Bring light to the darkest corners. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. She brought light to me in a very dark time in my life, and it warms my heart that she's still impacting the world more than 30 years later. That does it for now. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I genuinely enjoyed making it. The definition of a nerdgasm is when 2 or more really nerdy things that you love combine into one single form of media, and I definitely think that this qualifies for me. I also have an I've Come Back ranking episode in the works already, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to be in the loop when that happens. Thanks for tuning in for this deep dive. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, why don't you check out my Baddie deep dive next? Don't be toxic, and I'll catch you next time.